I like Styles a lot, but while I said yesterday that he's a guy that I wouldn't trade back from if he's there, I've changed my mind a bit. Now, I don't think they'll trade back from him. I think he just totally fits what they're all about. And by the way, a huge need. But I did some prep last night, Max. I mean, prep for the draft is kind of laughable because I don't know much more than most of you about this. And as I have said to a nauseating effect, I'm sure for many of you, this is the thing we obsess about the most and know the least about and get wrong without question most more than anything else, as do the teams. 2/3 of the time, the teams are going to be wrong on their picks. And the 1 out of 3 that they get right, they're not really sure which of the 3 it will be. They may have a strong feeling when they pick 3 players. Oh, this guy's got the best chance, but they really don't know. Ultimately, things change. Fit, scheme, situation, personality, all of these things factor into success or lack thereof once these players get to the NFL. And so much of it is so hard to predict. But anyway, I did some prep last night. And I really view this draft the way many view this draft, which is, after I think Bailey, and I understand Reese's upside, I just didn't see the same level of production that you got with Bailey at Texas Tech. And I think Caleb Downs I think Caleb Downs and Reuben Bain are locks to be really good players. Will they end up being transcendent, all-time generational kind of players at their positions? I have no idea. Bailey's the one that when you watch him in college against some pretty good competition, you see a guy that you could envision is a problem for teams every week when he plays. How are we going to block him on 2nd and 3rd and long? How are we going to keep him from wrecking the game? He's the one, to me, that looks that kind of player. So I would not pass on him. I doubt he gets to 7. But, of course, there's always stuff we don't know about these players. I mean, all the personal stuff, all the due diligence that the team does, we don't have that data. We don't. He's the one, along with Bain, but really Bailey is a scare you defensive talent. Bain is okay, he's going to be really good. Is he going to be great? I don't know, but he's certainly going to be really good. And I feel the same way about Downs. I like Styles a lot. I'm still not exactly sure that he is some sort of generational player. I love the character, the smarts, all of that stuff, and it's not going to surprise me at all if he's the pick and he's the guy we're talking about a week from today. Because a lot of the mocks have, Jeremiah Love going 4, and then maybe Downs to the Giants at 5. And if both of those guys are gone, maybe that leaves Styles for Washington at 7. He just strikes me as a guy that Dan Quinn would love and that Adam Peters would love. They are very much in lockstep. By the way, Adam Peters and Lance Newmark, the assistant general manager, held their pre-draft press conference yesterday, and we've got a lot of that sound. There aren't any huge reveals, but there were a few things that Adam Peters said that I think are worth playing back. But for me, if Bailey's not there and if they are shy on Bain because of the short arms and maybe anything else they've learned about him, I want to trade back. I want more picks. I want more swings at this thing. This is not going to be, I don't think, I mean, who the hell knows, but my guess is this isn't going to be one of those drafts where they passed on somebody at 7 that was so obvious for a trade back that generated, Sam Howell, Brian Robinson Jr., Cole Turner, and Jahan Dotson. I want more picks. They only have 6. They have a lot of needs. This isn't just a draft for the upcoming season. This upcoming season is about health. They have addressed a lot of potential needs on the side of the ball that needed the most defense. But next year is going to be a completely different year just based on health. If Jaden Daniels plays next year more than 4 complete games, they're going to be a better football team. If Terry McLaurin plays more than 7 complete football games next year, they're going to be a better football team. I mean, that's more important than anything that happens for next year, next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That's going to determine next season's record more than anything else. They have the quarterback. I believe they do. I know after last year, there's a lot of, fear that maybe we saw the beginning of an injury-ravaged career, a lack of availability. Who knows? You might be right. There's nothing prior to last year to suggest that that's going to be an issue with him in the NFL. He played all 20 games as a rookie, and he played 52 of 54 in college in 2 different places. But that's the most important thing in 2025. We can hand-wring over free agency and the draft all we want. The most important thing in 2026 is, will the starting quarterback play more than 4 complete games and a lot more than 4 complete games? Because if he doesn't, it's going to be another really difficult season. Back to the draft. I want to trade back unless Bailey's there or unless Bain is there and they don't care about the short arms and they say he's just too good. It doesn't matter. He's unblockable. He played NFL tackles, during his college run at Miami. He played NFL tackles in the run-up to the championship matchup. And then in the championship matchup, I see a player that's dominant. Ruben Bain, out of all of these players, outside of Mendoza, really, is the player that really, if you watched college football last year and you watched Miami, you couldn't take your eyes off Ruben Bain. He was that good of a college player. He was a total game wrecker. And Mesidor, their other D-end, was really good too, and they both benefited from the other's presence, just like Bain would from Owe, I believe, or Bailey would from Owe, Chason, etc. But if those two are gone, or if they're hesitant on Bain because their data, their analytics, people say, yep, at the NFL level, when you're playing that position, you can't be an elite level player with arms that short. You can be a really good player, but you can't be an elite player. If their data suggests that and they're hesitant to take him that high, I understand that. I would definitely not understand passing on Bailey if he's there, unless there's some sort of due diligence that uncovered something about his character, that we don't know about. I'm not into Mansour Delane at 7. I like him, but it's an important position and it's an important need. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, man, I'm fine with, Mikey Sanderstill and Trey Amos and the guy they got from Detroit in free agency as if, like, that's good enough, with their new and improved pass rush, which includes, by the way, let's not forget, Dorrance Armstrong returning, who was their best defensive player when he got hurt in week 7 against the Cowboys. But I'm not sitting here saying I'm just okay with Robertson, Sanderstill, and Amos. Amos was hurt a lot last year. He looked the part, but so did Sanderstill as a rookie. I think Delane's going to be a really good player. I think it's too high for him at 7. I'd rather trade back and get more swings in the draft. I'd rather trade back to the middle of the first round, have an opportunity at a receiver, maybe another corner, maybe another pass rusher, and then add a second and a fourth. You can find players in those rounds in this draft that may be not that far off from the top half of the first round. This is one of those drafts where, everybody believes it's pretty thin on generational talent. I do really, really like Carnell Tate, though. I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's too early at 7, just like I think Jeremiah Love's too early at 7. I really like Carnell Tate. The more and more I watched a lot of him as a college player, but looking at some of the other receivers that have been talked about, I really like Tate the most. I think Tate's going to be a really good wide receiver. I think he runs routes like Justin Jefferson. His hands are elite level. And this 4.5, whatever he ran at the combine, just does not show up when you're watching him at Ohio State. He does not look to be mediocre in take the top off with speed kind of a player. I also really like Omar Cooper Jr. And that's one of those guys where if you traded back and you picked up, a second rounder, now guys like Cooper Jr. and Denzel Boston, who I like a lot from Washington, he doesn't have, the top end speed, but he has the size and the hands and the body, ability. Denzel Boston's going to be one of those big ass red zone targets that delivers over and over again. I like Concepcion. He's so electric, but there are, hands issues with him. But there are receivers. I really like Branch from Georgia as a true slot. So there are players that they can pick in this draft. I'm not, even more adamant on this. I'm not a believer in Jeremiah Love at 7. I'm a believer that Jeremiah Love's going to be a top back, but he's not worth taking him at number 7 overall. I don't see it. I see a lot of much more straight line and less wiggle, even when you go back and just look at highlights. Yes, there's examples of wiggle, but with a lot of space and gaping holes against bad defensive teams in his senior year. Is he an explosive athlete? Yes. Does he have ridiculous burst? Yes. Does he have straight line, outrageous speed? For somebody his size, yes. Can he pass block? Yes. Can he catch the ball? Yes. All of those things, but not at the level of Bijan Robinson, not at the level of Christian McCaffrey. Like I've said, going back to the end of the season, it's more in line with just a faster version of Josh Jacobs. Nothing wrong with that. Josh Jacobs is a high-end running back. Jeremiah Love's going to be a high-end running back. He's just not going to be generational. And by the way, generational doesn't always pay off. It usually doesn't. Bijan Robinson hasn't played in a playoff game. Derrick Henry hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Christian McCaffrey has been to Super Bowls, hasn't won one. Gibbs, even with him after his rookie year, and he had a decent rookie season, but he was not the key player in their playoff run to the NFC Championship game against the 49ers. He could have been the key to a championship run in 2024 if Ben Johnson had kept David Montgomery out of the game and just given the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs against our team in the divisional round. I mean, that was insane. A guy's averaging over 10 yards per carry at halftime, and he only ends up in the game with 14 carries. I mean, and you're throwing wide receiver double passes. Ben Johnson's really good, don't get me wrong, but man, he had a bad night in that playoff game against us. I'm glad he did. But just giving the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs another 6 or 7 times may have been the difference in the game. But these running backs, Christian McCaffrey's on his second team, when he finally delivered deep into the playoff success at that position with a superstar group around him. I mean, for the last 5, 6, 7 years, has there been a team in the league with more A-plus players than the 49ers? But he didn't do that at Carolina. He was a great player at Carolina. Didn't do it. Saquon Barkley didn't do it with the Giants. But he did it in his second spot. Bijan Robinson hasn't been to the postseason. Derrick Henry's with his second team, is yet to be in a Super Bowl. It's not a position that typically, you ride to a deep into the postseason moment. The position of left tackle and wide receiver is more beneficial and more helpful to the quarterback per the EPA statistic, expected points added, than the running back position. I'm not taking Jeremiah Love at 7. If they do, I'm going to be excited to think of a really top-level back with Jaden Daniels. It'll be explosive. I'm not saying it won't be, but ultimately the data suggests you don't take guys like him at 7. Because the guys that have done it with their second teams, not their first. Trade back is what I am hoping for, and what I hope we'll be talking about a week from today. Trade back to where they could potentially pick up a Carnell Tate if he were to drop to 10 or 11, to potentially pick up a Reuben Bain if he were to drop because of the short arms, to potentially pick up, a Sadiq if he were there at 16, 17, the tight end from Oregon. There are a lot of possibilities for them. Maybe it's Delane who drops, to 12 or 13, and there's a trade opportunity there. The mocked trades have been the Jets over and over again at 16. Maybe they like Mekhi Lemon. Lemon is an incredible separator at the wide receiver position. I mean, if you traded back and you got Cooper or Lemon, yeah, I'd sign up for that right now. Cooper in particular. Cooper's just more versatile than Lemon. He's much more of an outside, but can also play inside, receiver. I like Surratt, too, from Indiana. Both of those receivers were incredible. And the quarterback was incredible. But to me, Cooper, I like Tate the most, but Cooper probably second after Tate, Boston after him, and then probably Lemon and Branch. But he's got high-level, ball skills. Cooper does. I mean, he had the catch of the year in that incredible game against Penn State. If you haven't seen that catch, go check it out. Unbelievable on back shoulders, really good, yards after catch, and is versatile. You see him lining up at the pro level inside or outside. A trade back, picking up a Cooper at 16, something like that, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Or a Bain at 14 or 13 or 12 if he drops because of the short arms, I wouldn't have a problem with that. So that's where I am today, a week from us knowing what they did. A trade back is my preference, unless Bailey is there or Bain, and they just don't care about the short arms because the player is that good. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. What do you hope we're talking about a week from today? What do you want the outcome to be? Your calls next. Max will weigh in as well. Ben Standing will join us on the show today. You'll hear from both Adam Peters and a little bit from Lance Newmark. He didn't talk a lot during this press conference. And I do think there were a couple of things that came out of it that are worth playing for you guys. I will actually have my NBA playoff predictions. No smell test for the NBA playoffs. I've never done that before. Only for football season and March Madness. But I am looking forward to the NBA playoffs. I think the next 2 months are really high level in terms of sports viewership. And in recent years, these 2 months have been off the chain. And there are series and potential series to watch coming up over the next 2 months that if you're a basketball fan, they will be can't miss. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. I do want you to know that Window Nation is offering right now, the more you buy, the more you save, which means that the more you buy, you could save up to 50% on your purchase. That means half price on everything that you buy from Window Nation. All I ask is that if you've been thinking about new windows because your windows are older, you want more efficiency, heating, air conditioning, you want to save money on utilities, you want your home to look nicer. If it's something that you've been thinking about, really my one favor to ask is just give Window Nation a chance to come out and give you a free in-home estimate. You call them at 866-90-NATION or go to windownation.com, mention my name. They'll schedule an hour or less in-home estimate. You'll find out which windows actually need to be replaced versus those that don't. And then they'll leave you with the quote, and then they'll leave you alone. You make the call. But in your hand, you'll have a quote for new windows that will include up to 50% off and 0% interest for 5 years if you choose to finance the purchase. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com.
if you're there at 7 and you have some trade offers, if you're trading back, what are the factors you weigh? What goes into that decision possibly to do that? What might entice you to do that?
Yeah, I think with any trade, whether it's at 7 or anywhere, it's who's available. How far back are you going? What are you getting for it? Who do you think will be available wherever you're going back to? And obviously you certainly can't predict that. It's a little easier to predict at the top of the draft than it is like in the second or third round. You don't really know who's going to be available. There's a lot more variance at that point, but all those things that factor in, and just if there's someone like last year, we got a lot of offers when we picked Josh, and there's a lot of offers, but we said before the draft, if Josh is there, we're going to pick him, and certainly happy we did that, and so that's a window into kind of how we look at it. But if that wasn't the case, then we would have weighed all those other things that I just talked about.
From Eli writes, Cooper's the guy, Sheehan, so much more so than Tate. I'm a Big Ten guy, and I was blown away with his control and hands. That was Adam Peters, by the way, talking about, the trade back possibilities, leaning towards, as he said yesterday at one point, the likelihood that they would pick at 7 in this draft. I mean, that's always the likelihood. The likelihood going in, the odds favor you're going to pick at your number. The less than 50-50 chance is that there's going to be a trade. Real quickly on Cooper Jr., I do like Tate more, but I think Cooper Jr. is my second favorite receiver in this draft. There are a couple of things when you go back and you just watch Cooper Jr., like the highlight stuff. And we saw a lot of Indiana if you're a college football fan this year anyway. But he's one of those guys that just plays with no fear. He just looks like a guy that is in control. There's a Stephon Diggs element to him. He runs 4.4, all right? Not 4.2, not 4.3, but 4.4. But he has great body control, and then he just looks like he is hungry for the ball. He has great hands. He's got a knack for making close contested catches. He's got a knack of back shoulder and creating that separation at that last minute, yanking it out of the air with his hands. I love him. There's a fearlessness with him over the middle that you just see. Number 3 for Indiana would be a great trade back and pick mid to late first round. Maybe he doesn't make it that far. I don't know. But yeah, he'd be my second favorite receiver in this draft. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. A week from today, we'll know what happened in the first round. What do you hope we're talking about? What do you want to happen in the first round? I've decided after hours and hours, or at least minutes and minutes of preparation, that after consideration of everything and the likelihood that the guy Bailey, who to me, and maybe Reese ends up being this as well, but I don't think either one of them is going to be there at 7. But Bailey looks like the guy with just a massive ceiling as a pass rusher. Like the guy that we could be talking about in a few years, like we talk about Will Anderson Jr. or Danielle Hunter or somebody like that. And I don't want to pass on somebody that could become that, because that's still super important to winning. Even though Myles Garrett's the best in the league and Cleveland doesn't win much, understood. But they haven't had a quarterback, and we have one. That's what I would like if he were there. But at this point, understanding that he won't be there, and that I would be okay if they passed on Bain, because their analytics people just absolutely convinced Peters and Newmark the short arms are an issue. He's going to be a really good football player, but he's not going to be a generational scare and offensive coordinator week in and week out player. But, man, Bain looks the part, man. Just watch him. If you're not a college football guy and you just start paying attention this time of year, that's the highlight reel to go watch. Reuben Bain. Dominant. Absolutely at times the best player on the field without a close second. What do you want to see happen? I want to see a trade back, and I want to see more picks in this draft that I think it's going to be hard to find the obvious generational talent. Doesn't mean this draft won't produce one. We're always wrong about this thing, as are the teams. But that would be my preference. Trade back, acquire more picks, maybe back to the 14, 15, 16 area, pick up a second rounder, pick up an extra fourth rounder or your first fourth rounder, and then you've got 8 picks in this draft rather than 6. Max, what do you hope that you are talking about a week from today?
A week from today, I hope we're talking about what this new David Blau offense will look like with Jeremiah Love lining up right behind Jaden Daniels. So because that's really how the way I feel like the league is moving. We saw it a lot last year, and over the past couple of years, safeties are getting put up in too high a lot more, so the box is getting a lot lighter. And if you kind of stack it up, I really think that a faster Josh Jacobs is an insane element to add when you already have a gazelle in your quarterback. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for us to be talking about a week from today. But who knows? He could go as high as 3 or 4. So we'll see.
You'll be there are going to be a lot of people. This is one thing that I sense more than anything about our fan base right now is that if Jeremiah Love's on the board at 7 and Washington doesn't take him, they take somebody else or they trade back, there will be a lot of real anger. And for, a year or two before we start to really see, what he is as a pro, a lot of second guessing Adam Peters. It's actually the riskiest thing he could do in terms of, he shouldn't give 2 craps about what the reaction's going to be to whatever he does. Please don't be like the last regime where they actually cared what we thought when it came to things like this. And I don't sense that they'll care at all. My God, that should never be in play. But there is no doubt in my mind. Can you think of another scenario next Thursday night that would be more upsetting to our fan base than if Jeremiah Love is there at 7 passing on him?
Maybe Sonny Styles?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But I don't think as much as Love. I think everybody, even those that didn't even watch college football, they are bought into the overwhelming consensus from draft so-called experts that he's generational and worthy of a top 3 pick. Like if he goes to Arizona at 3, nobody's going to think that that's too high for him.
Right.
I think it would be, but I also think he's going to be a really good player. All right, phone lines are open, 301-230-0980. 1 week from today, we'll be talking about what they did on night 1. What do you hope that we're talking about? Let's start with Greg in Reston. Greg, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kev? So I'm really hoping they stick and pick, as Adam said yesterday. I understand the probability of more bites at the apple with a trade back, but I also hope that we aren't this high in the draft anytime soon, and to be able to take advantage of that and maybe get a top-tier blue-chip prospect is too enticing. And I think that the interesting thing, and I like you, I love Bain as well. I think the interesting thing that AP said yesterday about Bain was talking about the scheme fit and moving guys up and down based on scheme. And I just can't see the Bain fit. And I'm, from my amateur eyes, I just don't see where he fits in that type of defense. But I'm like you, I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's not like if we envision a Brian Flores, style defense, he's not a 2-point stance guy. He is a hand in the dirt D end. And probably best in a base 4-3. In Washington, if they take on the Brian Flores defense with Durante Jones, it would be primarily a base 3-4, and you'd see a lot of linebackers. We can picture it right now. Oweh's going to be in a 2-point stance. Chaison's going to be in a 2-point stance. There are going to be games in which maybe Payne and Kinlaw are the only 2 players on the defensive front in a 3-point stance, with guys moving around and 7, 8 guys on the line of scrimmage pre-snap. And I get what you are envisioning there, that Bain isn't necessarily that's a bit square peg round hole with the way he plays. But I don't know. They'll find a way, I think, for him if they ended up drafting him. But, it really does matter. They talked a lot about scheme yesterday and the two new coordinators and what the offense and defense, will look like moving forward. And it'll be different than it's been. And you can't draft a player no matter how great that just wouldn't fit that scheme. We see a lot of players that ultimately could have been what they were thought to be based on where they were drafted that just got drafted by the wrong team and put into the wrong scheme. So, yeah, I hear you on that, Greg. What else?
And I will say real quick on Love, I'm with you typically that I don't like him at 7, but I think just like we were lucky in 2024 that we were 2 in that draft, I think we're a little unlucky sometimes if you look at it with being 7 in this draft. I'm kind of on Love, and I think if you read the Adam Schefter tea leaves, I think he's going to be there, and I think there's an over 50% chance that he's there and we take him. I mean, Adam Schefter said on your show that he bet a colleague dinner that he's going to make it to us. And then yesterday he even said that he still thinks that that's where he ends up. Yeah. I just think that there's some signs there from the best reporter in the NFL that he's going to make it and we might get him.
The other thing about it is that while you see Jeremiah Love mocked over and over again to Tennessee at 4, I was just watching some of the shows this morning, and it's like all of the really good NFL insiders are hearing that Tennessee's not going to take Love. So the mock drafters have Love, not being available, but some of the insiders, and reporters are suggesting that Tennessee, that from what they're hearing, Tennessee's not going to take Love. Who else could take Love? The Giants could certainly take Love. At 5, I mean,
Harbaugh's never taken a running back that high.
I understand that, yeah. But if he's all of that, I see Styles or Downs to the Giants. By the way, I can't imagine that John Harbaugh doesn't love Reuben Bain, but that's another story. I could see Arizona, although they did sign Tyler Algier in the offseason, and Algier is really good, and James Conner's back. Yeah, all right, thanks, Greg, appreciate it. Let's go to Robert in Annapolis. Robert, what do you think we're going to be talking about? What do you want us to be talking about in terms of what they did on night 1 a week from today?
Well, good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Let me ask you if you'd be happy with this. If your team sent their number 7 pick and Oweh to the Raiders for Max Crosby, would that make you happy? Or if your team sent their number 7 Oweh and next year's number 1 to the Browns for Myles Garrett, would that make you happy?
Ding, ding.
Okay.
It's going to take a lot more than that, though, to get Myles Garrett.
If they sent their number 7 to the Falcons for Bijan Robinson, would that make you happy?
Boy, God, could you imagine him and Jaden Daniels in the same backfield?
There you go.
Let me just tell you, I know these are all hypotheticals and you're having fun. You really can't trade Oweh at this point because of the salary cap hit. All of that would accelerate. And it would be, that's not going to happen. But and it would take a lot more to get Myles Garrett than Oweh in the number 7 pick.
No. Number 7, Oweh, and next year's number 1. I said.
Next year's number 1. You said. I still think I still think it takes more to get Garrett. I don't think it takes more to get Crosby anymore.
No.
Can I just mention this one thing because you're a Ravens fan and you're in Baltimore.
Sure.
You're in Annapolis. You're Robert from Annapolis.
Go ahead.
But I think that I believe Baltimore, and I know most people don't believe them. I believe that their intention was for that trade to go through and to give up 2 first-rounders. And this is why, because I think I've mentioned this, but maybe I haven't. If the price dropped even a little bit, why didn't Dallas jump back in? There's something that scared the Ravens and even scared the Cowboys about the medical.
Long-term health is what scared them. That's right. Exactly what it was. And then, of course, when Hendrickson became available, that just made it easier to make that decision. They wouldn't have offered it. The Ravens have never traded a first-round draft pick for anybody. They're not going to trade 2 if they're trying to put up some front. What they should have done is they should have had picked up Linderbaum's option year, even though it was expensive, and then they could have packaged him in a trade to the Raiders if they so wish. They screwed up on that by they didn't keep the rights to Linderbaum. That was their error. If they didn't want to pay him that much money, they should have kept him and then moved him for, obviously they could get something for him. But bigger story next week, the NFL draft or the NBA playoffs. I'll exit with that.
Well, I mean, that's easy. The NFL draft will
not
absolutely
on your show. Not on your show.
No,
NBA
it will.
playoffs.
Of course, it's going to be on my show, the NFL draft, as much as I will on that night and on Friday night and on Saturday. I'll be watching the NBA playoffs simultaneously. But the ratings different. I mean, it won't even be close in the ratings. The NFL draft, the NFL draft is the number one sporting event on television that isn't a game, and really that isn't an NFL or college football game, because it trumps obviously the NHL playoffs in TV ratings, and it would trump most of the NBA playoffs in ratings. Let's go to Robert in Easton. Robert, what do you want the story to be a week from today in terms of what they did a week from last night?
Good morning, Kevin. First of all, I don't think Bailey or Styles will be there at 7. I have Bailey going to the Jets, and I have Styles going to Tennessee because Silas sees a lot of Fred Warner and Sonny Styles, and I think they'll scoop him up. What I would like to see is a trade back, but if you go to 13, like Ben Standing had mocked last week, or 16, like a lot of them are doing to the Jets, I think that'll be too far. What would be ideal for me is if they trade back to Kansas City. See, Andy Reid, if he wants something real bad, he don't mind jumping up 2 spots to get who he wants. And if he sees Reuben Bain there at 7, I'm sure he thinks he can fit perfectly in Spags' defense. And they have extra draft capital because of the McDuffie trade. So Washington can get an extra draft pick later on in the draft. And
you get a
number
third.
9.
You'd get a third, and that would be it. You'd get a third, and I'm looking to see where Kansas City's thirds are. But the point chart would say that you'd basically get a third rounder to move back 2 spots. So that would add a second, third round pick to the mix on Friday night. The Chiefs they have number 74, so it's a relatively early third round pick. It's actually more points. They might not be able to get a pick that high, but if they got a pick that high based on the draft value chart, it'd be good value for them to trade back 2 spots and pick up that extra third.
And I would like to see them pick Delane because I think he has the potential to become a Weatherspoon like he did with Seattle, and Stingley like he did with Houston. And I would like that scenario very much. Thank you.
I like Stingley as a better comp, also same school, but I like the player too, not at 7, but a trade back potentially for sure. Let's go to our guy, Aveen. Aveen, what do you hope we're talking about a week from today about what they did on Thursday night?
Hey, Kevin. I'm really hoping that they address receiver in the first round, or if not in the first round, if they trade back first or second round. I think they need to address it early. Love is an okay substitute because he does produce explosives. But to me, Kevin, I guess I've been viewing the roster differently than a lot of other people. A lot of smart people like you and Kime, kind of saying it's pretty well filled out. I think they do have, an emergency light blinking need at receiver. I think it's a huge issue. And to me right now, they have like a bottom 5 receiver room in the league.
Right.
And, that sets you up. Like, I think that has the potential to like really mess up this season, and it puts you in a horrible position going to 27 if you can't really address it. So to me, it's a huge need. It's the only premium position they really haven't put any significant investment in since the new regime has started and Jane's been here. So to me, I don't want to be drafting on need, heavily on need or reaching, but I would breathe a huge sigh of relief if they drafted Tate or if they traded back and drafted Cooper. Because to me, the way I view it is, okay, if we draft defense, in the top 10, if we draft Styles or Caleb Downs, I'll be like, okay, that's cool. But I don't know if this defense can be a top 10 defense because of that. I don't know what they're going to be. They might just be middle of the pack still.
No, you're right.
But if we draft, offense, if we draft a receiver, I'm thinking, okay, I feel confident this can be a top 10 offense. It might be an elite offense. Jaden's set up to have a big year. You're not putting him at risk of being limited by what's around him or underperforming, which I think he is. He might be at risk at. So I just think it's a huge need. And, I think too many people take comfort in 2024, but that was not a long-term sustainable way to run an offense. And Jaden Daniels, as good as he was limited by that offense. He hasn't thrown the ball deep that much since he's been here with us because of the roster limitations. He was a great deep ball thrower in college, threw it downfield a lot, but he hasn't that much since he's been here with us. So I just want to see him, maximize his talent.
Look, okay, so a couple of things. Aveen is a great caller and a sharp caller here. So I like Aveen's thinking all the time, pretty much all the time. But you're not considering, I know you are, but you have not mentioned considering that if they don't draft a receiver, let's just say in the first or third round, and they don't have a second round pick and they don't trade back, that they're done. Because obviously Brandon Ayuk is sitting out there. Juwan Jennings is still sitting out there. Stephon Diggs is still sitting out there. There are possibilities for them to upgrade their receiver room in 26, on a short-term deal for a Diggs or even a Jennings at this point. We don't know what Jennings is going to get. He's obviously priced himself out of wave 1 and wave 2 of free agency. And then the Ayuk thing is the thing that's hanging out there. So I'm not going to feel great about the wide receiver room if they enter 2026 with what they have now. I feel you on that. With that said, there are other positions that help Jaden Daniels in the offense, and those positions also reside on defense. They've got to be better defensively. You and I both know that. They cannot be put out onto the field 70% of the time following a score by the other team. They've got to force more punts. They've got to create better starting field position. They've got to start creating a better turnover margin. Those things are as important. But I'm with you. I'm not a fan of the wide receiver room, but I think if it doesn't get addressed next weekend, then we know there's going to be some activity between now and week 1. And you might have to wait until week 1 because the 49ers don't have to do anything with Ayuk until August 31st.
Yeah, I'll just say I don't want to be relying on Ayuk. He feels like a huge dice roll. If they do sign him, I hope they had, really strong intel on that things are looking good with him.
Well, they would.
And yeah, so that, and then, with the other receivers, I don't know. I don't want to just keep going older and, kicking the can down the road, because now you have an older receiver in 2027 and there's no Terry. I mean, I don't want to be in a position where there's no
you're right. Like the best possible scenario actually would be adding a young receiver and then maybe also adding Ayuk. Because this time next year, Terry may not be part of the roster, and an Ayuk might not be a part of the roster. So I want them to address wide receiver in this draft. I got to run. Thanks, Savine. Everybody else on hold, stay there. Simple question. A week from today, we'll know what they did on night 1. What do you hope we're talking about in terms of what they did a week from today? 301-230-0980.
Do you have a sense at this point, compared to past years even, of what might happen in front of you?
No, I mean, so 2 years ago, kind of knew that one pretty good. Last year, didn't know. There's a lot of space in between 1 and 29. But this year, I mean, we talked about it, I think, a little bit in Phoenix, but it's hard to really understand or figure out where everything's going to go, where everybody's going to go. And man, you hear something new every day, right? So, and really nobody's telling the truth. So, but what we do is we trust our board, trust our evaluations, and be ready to pick or do whatever we need to do with that pick. And so, I do know this, like if we're sitting there at 7 and we do pick, I know we'll get a good player.
Before he got started yesterday, he just thanked a lot of people for all the work that they did. He also loved the new uniforms and talked about that briefly. But a lot of their analytics people, their information people, they do a lot of work in preparation for this draft. Of course, the scouts are working on this year round. But they also, do these mock simulations, which are much easier to do today than they were back in the day. I remember Charlie Casserly telling me, and he's told me this a lot of times over the years, pre or post draft. And we'll try to get Charlie on after the draft. I think sometimes getting some of the really super sharp guys on afterwards is better because we know who we have and they can give you their analysis of the players that are actually going to play for the team. But Charlie used to say that they paid attention to Mel Kiper. They paid attention to, and, Mel was the number one draft, guy and mock drafter forever. And that started this incredible industry of draft experts or so-called experts, draft mock guys. And they would pay attention to it because they felt like certain guys had some information. They were talking to teams. And sometimes teams would give some of those people enough in the form of sort of background information that, if you listened closely enough, you'd have an idea. But lying season is a good way to describe it. And I think there have been several drafts here recently that have not gone exactly the way they've been mocked out. And certainly that starts to happen after, the first 10 picks. You start to see some wide variety of or a real diversion sometimes from a lot of the mocks. There will be 2 or 3 players selected in the first round minimum that weren't in anyone's first round mock. That happens every year. Ben Standing's a mock champion multiple times. He'll join us at 12. The question is, we're a week away from knowing what they did, what Washington did on night 1 of the NFL draft. What do you hope we're talking about a week from today about what happened the night before? For me, I think I have settled in on, if it's not Bailey and they decide not to go Bain because of short arms or something else, I would understand that, I think. But I really like Bain a lot, and I really like Bailey a lot. Then I'd prefer a trade back. And so, yeah, a trade back to 14, 15, 16, a potential, Kenyon Sadiq or an Omar Cooper Jr. or, a Denzel Boston, that kind of thing makes sense to me, picking up, a second. If you trade back just 2 or 3 spots, you're not going to pick up a second rounder. The draft difference, here, I'll give you the draft value chart, the Jimmy Johnson draft value chart that's used a lot. It's not the end-all be-all because demand can certainly change the math on this. But Washington's number 7 overall, value-wise, is worth 1,500 points on the draft chart. The Chiefs, 2 picks later, 1,350. That's a difference of 150 points. You got to go all the way down towards the end of the 3rd round to find a pick worth 150 points to make up the difference. So that's where you go, okay, if you trade 2 spots back, it's worth 150 points. It's a 3rd rounder, maybe not an early 3rd rounder with which is what the Chiefs have. But if they traded back with the Jets, The Jets at 16 are 1,000 points. Washington's at 1,500. That's a difference of 500 points. Now you're talking about an early second-round pick or a combination of a middle to late second-round pick and a fourth-round pick. 301-230-0980. Lap's been on hold for a while. Lap, thanks for holding. Go ahead. What do you hope is the storyline a week from today?
Well, you know who I want, Cornell Tate, man. That's who I think can make a difference. I know he's probably high, but I am also open with you, Kevin, what you said, trading back. You know, if we can get Cooper, because he's a stud too, but we definitely need to address receiver. And you definitely can't pass Love, but I just think Love and Bailey's not going to be there. I'm a big fan of Bailey like you, but I just don't think he's going to be there. But my preference is Tate, and I think Tate can push Terry. You know what I'm saying? Possibly replace Terry. We might need to get another receiver, and definitely push the young receivers that we have, because when Terry was out, nobody really stepped up. You know what I'm saying? And Tate can make everybody be on their A game if he's coming out doing the explosive plays he's doing and playmaking ability. So, yep.
Yeah, and you don't need Tate to be your number one day one, but he's got the potential to eventually be a number one if Terry isn't here. He hasn't been a number one because they've had phenomenal receivers during his time, but Terry wasn't a number one at Ohio State. So, by the way, I'm just looking at my notes from all of my prep last night, all 45 minutes of it. It was a little bit longer than that. But there is a player that I want to talk about that I haven't mentioned as a trade back possibility, in the middle of the first round. I'll get to him coming up. But thanks, Lap. Appreciate it. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, what's up?
I'm going to go with what we said yesterday, Kevin. It's David Bailey and Sonny Styles. And I'm preferably hoping it's Sonny Styles, because you could have a superstar on offense in Jaden Daniels and a superstar on defense in Sonny Styles. But Kevin, look, there's two things I have an issue with you. The first thing we talked about yesterday, it was echoed on Get Up this morning by Tannenbaum and a lot of people kind of agreeing with what I was saying about Jeremiah Love. You poo-pooed it yesterday when I said everybody would love to have Jeremiah
I don't
Love.
even remember what it was. That was all the way back yesterday. You got to remind me.
Well, when I said I didn't think Jeremiah Love would be a good fit for Jaden Daniels, because I think Jaden Daniels is a pocket passing, athletic passing quarterback. And he likes to get everybody involved. I think with Love, you would have to get him involved to a certain extent. And if you don't, there could be a problem. Terry McLaurin is totally different between getting the receiver involved and getting the running back involved in that kind of case. So that's what I was trying to say.
We do this a lot with one another, and I know you assume that I remember single thing you say, and I do remember a lot more about what you say than other callers. Can you stop talking when I'm talking? Because it's really annoying for the listener. You do that all the time too. When I start to address you after you're done, you just continue to talk. But I don't specifically remember you saying that yesterday. But look, I've got issues. I can remember anything from 1985, but I've got issues with 2025. But are you saying that what you said yesterday, and apparently everybody on Get Up this morning agreed with you, that Jeremiah Love is not a good fit? Or is a good fit?
I'm not saying that he's – no, hold up. Let me rephrase that, because that came out wrong, okay? I apologize for that. A lot of people aren't harping on Jeremiah Love. And I think there's a chance that he could slide down. I definitely think Caleb Downs is going to slide down. But I think Sonny Styles would definitely be there. I think he'd be a good fit.
Stop bouncing around. What did you say? Is Jeremiah Love, you know what? I don't care what you said. On Get Up this morning, were they saying, because I haven't heard one person or read one person that hasn't said Jeremiah Love would be gold with Jaden Daniels. Are you saying that people started to suggest, because you believe Jaden Daniels is more of a pocket passer, that it's not a good fit? I'm still not following.
Okay. No, Kevin. Are you finished? Can I respond now, sir?
Yes.
Please?
It's your turn.
Okay. No one said anything about Jaden Daniels. But I think what it is I think everybody has been hyping up, and this is where I'm saying everybody's been hyping up Jeremiah Love. And I think the one thing you and I agree on, and this is where we agree on, and it's not that we disagree on anything on this. We agree that I think Jeremiah Love is at 7 is too high for him.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. And I think he's going to slide down. But at 4 and 5, they were talking about the Titans and the Giants may look elsewhere. And Cleveland, and they didn't talk about Washington. So if they're thinking at 4 and 5, Washington, you said something the other day, Kevin, where if a guy starts sliding, I don't know if Washington will take him because they may want to find out why that guy is sliding.
Or they may already know why he's sliding. Hopefully they already know why a guy is sliding. Hopefully they don't have to check on why he's sliding. They know.
Well, or here's the other thing you could have too. You remember 1999 when Washington
Champ Bailey.
Pick, right? Well, forget that. Well, but why we got Champ Bailey? We got Champ Bailey because Mike Ditka called up Washington
and traded his whole draft,
everything, and for that
Ricky Williams.
So, right. So my thing is that could be in play here as well too, where a team 16
really
they give up the farm or maybe a little bit more, give up the farm to come
for
up
Jeremiah Love.
We get what we need. Okay.
No, look, that would be awesome, right? That would really be fun if Jeremiah Love, which, by the way, I think you and I, it sounds like we're in agreement on something. Thank you for the call, Mark and Largo, as always. We're in the minority on Jeremiah Love's really, really good, but not generational. But everybody else seems to think he's generational. So if he's sitting there at 7 and Adam Peters and Lance Newmark and company don't think he's generational, maybe somebody will overpay big time for him. That would be a great scenario. If you ended up getting more than what the draft chart says you got, like you're not going to get what Mike Ditka traded to Charlie Casserly, an entire draft for Ricky Williams. You're not going to get that. But if you could really get 2, 3, 4 teams, like, wow, we can get Jeremiah Love, maybe you can really extract a high price for it. That'd be a great situation. I think it would be. I can tell you this, my next caller doesn't think it would be a good situation because he would take Jeremiah Love. Paulie's with us. So did I get that right, that a week from today you're hoping that they selected Jeremiah Love at number 7?
L to the W. What's going on, big guy? You're 100% correct on that. But I'll throw this caveat in here. If somebody going to overpay for him, listen, I'm listening. I'm listening and I'm looking. But a lot of my main thing is I don't want to go back too far into this draft. I need a great player. And the further back you go, I don't think, you're taking a chance of not getting a great player, but a very good player. I want a great player.
I do too.
Love is going to be a great
I do
player.
too. I'm questioning whether or not when they're on the clock at 7, if there is that generational ceiling player left.
But see, that's where we differ at, because I think Love is that player. And I heard you talking about the running backs, the other running backs before didn't make an impact or their second team. Well, I'm going to say this. The teams they went to wasn't good teams. Outside of Gibbs, drafted by Detroit, and they was an ascending team. Them other teams was bad teams. McCaffrey, the Panthers, bad teams. Barkley, the Giants. I remember a lot of people criticizing the Giants for taking Barkley.
I know.
Because they had so many needs or whatever. But
yeah.
I'm going to say this.
I mean, Zeke, let me just say, Zeke at 4 overall to Dallas in 2016. Now, they ended up having a rookie quarterback that season, but Dak played really well. The team around him, including the offensive line, was damn good. And what did they do? They got to the playoffs, but they won one game.
right. The narrative with Zeke to Dallas was there was a running back away. Team them up with Romo, and they should be good. And that's what I was about to go to with Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. Remember that year when he went to the Eagles, that season, the Eagles had an old and slow defense. They fixed the defense, and then they added Saquon Barkley with the athletic quarterback and Jalen Hurts, and that offense took off.
I agree with you. I mean, the setting and the environment and the quarterback totally matters. I hear you on that. And that's why, by the way, if they did take Love, I'd be excited to see what the two of them would look like. I would be very excited about it. I just think positional value isn't there at 7, and the player's not going to be generational.
Let me say this, though. If Love is gone before 7, if Love is gone, I would like to see us trade back, but not 6, 7, 8 spots, maybe 1 or 2 spots back. And like I said, I'm sold on Downs right now, on defense. I'm sold on Downs like I'm sold on Love on defense. I think Downs is the equivalent of Love on defense, a playmaker, a guy who's all over the field, a guy he's going. You put Downs in that secondary, he's going to make a difference and add to everybody else in that secondary. So I want Love. If Love is not there, let's move back and maybe still get Downs, man. But I'll take that up. Hey, love you, big guy. Hail to the W, man.
All right. Paulie, everybody, from the 757. All right. We'll wrap that up. But a week from today, we'll know. And, it's a big draft. Every draft is a big draft. Here's the bottom line. If they end up with 6 picks, they need 2 players that 3 years from now are major contributors. And, they've got it's where they're picking. There's no guarantee that'll happen. You've got a first rounder that's high. You certainly hope that you hit that, but it doesn't always hit. You need 2 out of 6. 3 out of 6 would be an absolute home run. I've said this before. I'm not always in favor of trading back because I don't want to pass on generational ceiling players. For guys that don't have that, but you get more of those guys. But the bottom line is the math with the way this thing turns out works best if you have more picks rather than fewer picks. If you're hitting on 1 out of 3 and you're not sure which out of the 3 is going to be the one, you'd rather hit on 4 out of 12 than 2 out of 6. 4 contributors greater than 2 contributors. So this is the kind of draft that may not avail itself to a lot of trade back opportunities, although the Chiefs GM yesterday said he sees a lot of trades. Now, maybe a lot of those come in the second half of the first round. But no quarterback to trade up for, and Washington could be on the clock with Love gone, with Styles gone, with Bailey gone, Reese gone. Who knows? At that point, who's the player that somebody's coming up to get? It's not a quarterback, as we know. All right, when we come back, some of what Adam Peters said that we haven't played for you that I thought was interesting. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
I know you said at owners' meetings that you didn't anticipate a ton of trades just 'cause you always need somebody to move up, and there's not that same level of quarterback class this year. Do you anticipate picking at 7 at this point?
Yeah, certainly have to be ready to do that. I would say more likely than not that would happen, but you never know. You never know who's, it'll depend on who's on the board. If a team wants to move up, and then we have to decide if we want to do that. But I would say more likely than not, we'd stay and pick, but I don't foresee us moving up, but moving back just depends on the circumstances, but we're not like, I don't want to say we're not actively trying to move back. We're always assessing our options and making sure we're ready, and then understanding who's going to be there at certain positions and certain spots, towards the middle to the later part of the first round. But and just being prepared for that, but not really actively trying to get out of that at all.
Yeah, I mean, the chances are higher than lower that they're going to pick at 7. That's what'll likely happen, that they will end up sticking at 7. Trades don't happen more often than, they don't. They don't happen more often than they do, is a better way of saying it. And I think that the odds favor that they'll end up taking a player at 7. My preference here, 1 week after they would have picked on Thursday night, is a trade back unless David Bailey falls to 7, or Ruben Bain is a player that I just think is so dominant, or was so dominant as a college player, that if they tell me, or if they don't care about the short arms, then I'm not going to care about the short arms. I mentioned a little while ago that there was, a player that I, in a trade back scenario, say to 16 or 17, there's a player that I actually would really like. Omar Cooper Jr. would be a receiver that I'd really like. I like Denzel Boston a lot too. But there are 2 other players. Akeem Mesidor lined up opposite Ruben Bain at Miami. He is a very good pass rusher. And if he weren't 25 years old and coming off some injuries from a few years ago, he'd be going a lot higher in this draft. Mesidor is just one of those guys that people think you're getting an older player, like he's at that age, and you get that in college now with all of the transfer portals and all the extra years. And we're kind of through the COVID year process, but Mesidor seemed like he was in college forever. I mean, this was what they referred to as kind of a super senior season. He played 2 years at West Virginia, starting in 2020, which was the COVID year, and then played 4 years in Miami and was outrageously productive this past year. Led the team in pressures, had 12 and a half sacks, 4 forced fumbles. He's a problem on the edge. So the idea of Akeem Mesidor, in a trade back to the middle of the first round would be interesting to me. And the other player, and I want you to just consider this for a moment. Peter Woods, the defensive tackle from Clemson, was supposed to be a top 10 pick in this draft, and he just did not have a great senior year. Clemson, didn't have a great season. But man, if you consider that this is going to be Deron Payne's final year, and it very likely will, and he'll sign somewhere in free agency, and maybe they'll get a compensatory pick depending on what they do in free agency in 2027. But Peter Woods is a dynamic athlete and talent as an interior defensive tackle. I mean, he is quick, he is strong, and I would imagine that the tape, especially before last year, shows a guy that excites people in a big way. Those would be 2 other names that could be possibilities if they were to trade back with a team in the middle of the first round. Picking up, by the way, an extra second and maybe even, a mid to late round pick in the 4th round. Real quickly, too, because I just wanted to look this up so I had exactly what it was, because I think it was Mark and Largo brought up the Ricky Williams trade from way back in 1999. The New Orleans Saints were coached by Mike Ditka, who had control of the Saints draft that particular year. And he was in love with Ricky Williams, the great running back out of the University of Texas, the Heisman Trophy winner in 1998 out of Texas. And they started looking for trades to try to get up to a spot where they could take Ricky Williams. They actually made proposals to teams like Cincinnati and the Colts, but ultimately they traded their 1999 first-round pick, Washington did, which was 5th overall, to the Saints for a 1999 first-round pick, 12th overall. They later traded that to Chicago to draft Champ Bailey, so they moved up. They also got a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and a 5th-round pick, and a 6th-round pick, and a 7th-round pick in the 99 draft from the Saints. They got the Saints' entire draft for the opportunity at number 5 to draft Ricky Williams. Washington put together a deal, ended up selecting Champ Bailey, but it's not over. They also got a 2000 first-round pick, which turned out to be the 2nd overall, in which Washington used that pick to select LeVar Arrington. Remember, in the 2000 draft, Washington had number 2, which was the New Orleans pick, and number 3, which was their own pick. And they selected not their own pick, the other pick that they had acquired via trade, and they selected Chris Samuels and LeVar Arrington. But they also got a 3rd-round pick. So the haul was 2 firsts, 2 thirds, a 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th for Ricky Williams, number 5 overall. Wow, what a draft! What a trade Charlie Casserly pulled off. And remember, that was the setup to a 99 season in which they traded for, Brad Johnson, a trade that Snyder probably would have tried to turn the clock back on had he taken ownership quickly enough. But they went on to go 10-6 in 96 and win a playoff game and nearly win 2 playoff games, but lost in the divisional round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 14-13. That was Brian Mitchell's final game in Washington. He had a kickoff return for a touchdown, by the way. All right, back to yesterday and the pre-draft press conference. We played some of the Adam Peters stuff for you, but there was other stuff that I thought was interesting. Look, with this guy, you're not going to get a lot. I watched this press conference. I'll tell you what, he's just very good at not giving you much at all, but at the same time, giving you enough for you to chew on, even though it's probably not true. He was also fidgety yesterday, very fidgety. Lance Newmark, the assistant general manager, was sitting next to him and barely spoke. I think he got one direct question and then chimed in on another. But there were a couple of sound bites that I wanted to play for you from the Adam Peters press conference. So this was him talking about, schemes that have changed on defense and on offense, and specifically what types of players would be good fits for the new Durante Jones defense.
Adam, I actually wanted to ask you specifically about Durante and kind of how things may be a little different now going forward, and the types of players, if you stay at 7, and not names, but just the types of players that would be good fits for what he wants to do.
It could be tricky. It's stepping it there. But I think, David, I think it's always the same. You want to try to find a person that, impacts your team. And when you're picking in the top 10, find someone that impacts your team, right away, and then for the long run. And, defensively specifically, that could be anywhere on the field. And there's a lot of guys in that will possibly be there in different levels of the defense, really every position, quite frankly, that can really impact us in a real positive way. So we're fortunate in that way. And it just depends on who's there and who we think can, be the most impactful, not only in 2026, but and beyond. So I don't think there's anything, especially when you're picking in the top 10, there's not too many guys that aren't like scheme fits. They're all pretty good. So I think it's just picking the most impactful guy that can help us win games.
Yeah, there was a theme, and this was his theme last year, where he really is about, especially in the first round, picking the best player available. I mean, didn't they sort of do that with Josh Connerly last year? We certainly weren't expecting, after they traded for Laramie Tunsil, that they were going to select an offensive lineman late in the first round. They had a very late pick because they were in the NFC Championship game the year before. Keep in mind that even with all of the players that they added to their defense, there are some short-term deals, like Chaison's a year, Omenahue's a year. Witherspoon is, I think, a 1-year deal. They've got Oweh on a 4-year deal, and Chenal and Settle on 3-year deals, and Cross and Robertson on 2-year deals. But you're not passing on a great player at a position because you feel like you don't have a need for that position. I think personally, there are only 2 positions in this draft where, even if that player is the best available player, you probably pass on that player. And that is at quarterback and left tackle. Those are your 2 best players on the team, Jaden Daniels and Laramie Tunsil. But every other position, even if it were a tackle that you projected as a right tackle, or a tackle that you could move inside to play guard, or even if it was a guard that was the best player on the board after a trade back, I mean, they were willing to let Chris Paul go, and Brandon Coleman, who knows? Maybe Coleman gets a shot at center. Every other position, I mean, Chaison's on a 1-year deal. Oweh, I think, is going to work out. I actually feel bullish about the addition of Oweh and what he could become as an ascending, by the way, not just situational. I know some people have said he's situational. I think he's more than that in terms of a pass rusher. But you've got needs everywhere, man. Everywhere. You don't have to take a quarterback, and you don't have to take a left tackle. That's it. Everybody else is either not guaranteed to be great or on a short-term deal. This was the next soundbite we were going to play from Adam Peters. He was asked about an in-division trade proposal. We've seen some of those pulled off. Typically, they're not, necessarily deals that happen a lot, but he's already made a trade within the division, with Howie Roseman in his first draft in the second round, picking up an extra second rounder to allow Philadelphia to move up to take a really good corner from Iowa. But he was asked about in-division trades.
We've seen you make division trades within the division. How, if at all, does that change with a top 10 pick? If Dallas calls or Philly calls, does that impact it at all?
No, I don't think it impacts it at all. Obviously, I think there's more scrutiny with that, but it certainly doesn't change. The thought process is always, is this the right decision for our team? And if that's the case, then we'll do it. And it doesn't really matter what the team is. We got to beat them on Sundays and Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, regardless. So, to me, that doesn't make a huge difference there. It's just whatever is best for our team.
I heard that answer and I thought to myself, if I'm Washington and let's just say the Giants had a major quarterback need and there was a quarterback, the second best quarterback on the board and was projected to be top 5, top 10 at number 7, it'd be a premium for me to make a trade with a team in the division. I think there should be a premium on that. Why am I going to trade a potential starting quarterback at number 7? Look, I just think that the price should be higher for an in-division trade for a quarterback specifically. What was the draft a few years ago? Was it the 21 draft where the Justin Fields was part of the... Yeah, because Philadelphia, remember, traded up with Dallas in the division to take Devontae Smith. They traded with was it with the Cowboys or with the Giants? It was with the Giants. They bumped in front of Dallas. I got to go look that up. But there was maneuvering within the division. Philly got Devontae Smith. Dallas got Micah Parsons. The Giants went back and ended up selecting Kadarius Toney, who I loved in that draft. I really thought Kadarius Toney was going to be a really good wide receiver. Not correct. He was really good at Florida, but he also had major issues. Yeah, I heard that answer, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not trading for a quarterback need to be filled to a team within the division without charging a premium. This was the next Adam Peters soundbite. Does the lack of depth at any position affect the decision at 7? This is more need versus best player available kind of a discussion. Here it is.
That's a question kind of for both of you. I know that it's always best player available wherever you're picking, but when you have large gaps between picks, like you're picking at 7th and then wherever you guys pick after that on day 2, if there's a position maybe that you don't feel as strong about the depth, does that factor in at all? Let's say, I'm just going to name a position. Let's say I don't think the receiver class is that deep, so we should, if we feel really good about this one at 7, we shouldn't try to wait until the 3rd round. Like, how do you factor in those types of things into what you do at an individual pick?
Yeah, I think sometimes you overthink that, especially when you're picking at 7, you're trying to worry about the next pick, just kind of get that right. And then see what comes next. It is a long wait. It really sucks because all these good players go off the board and you're like, come on, it takes forever, but we want to get that pick right. And then, so I don't want to overthink it and try to kind of play like 3D chess and hope that, because you never know what's going to happen. And so really nail that pick, get the right guy for our team, and then see what comes next.
It's what you want him to do. You just want him to get a great player. I mean, if it fills a need, great. If it doesn't, it's probably better than what you have on this roster. Again, outside of quarterback and left tackle. He was then asked about the every year question that goes to GMs, and that is positional value. For years, can't take a linebacker in the top half of the first round. Can't take a running back top half of the first round. Can't take a safety in the top half of the first round. Shouldn't take a tight end in the top half of the first round. I think that's changing a little bit. We've seen some really good running backs, taken in the higher portions, top half of the first round, Gibbs and Bijan in recent years. The 2 tight ends last year in Warren and Loveland. We've seen that teams have not necessarily bought into positional value. They're just trying to take the best player available. Here's what your general manager, Adam Peters, said to that question.
Adam, I'm curious. We talk about positional value every year when it comes to the draft. Does the calculus on that change for you guys when you're picking at 7 as opposed to picking at 29?
No, I think just finding the best player that can help your team the most, and regardless of position, I think, and I think that applies kind of everywhere. So every position, everywhere you're in the draft. So, I don't want to you just get too deep into positional value. You kind of get lost in who's going to really be able to help your team.
Yeah. A theme there, we're just trying to draft the best available player. We need a really good player, and they do. And so far in their first 2 drafts with their first round picks, they got Jaden Daniels. I think that's a winner. And Josh Connerly really came on second half of the season. Looks like at the very least, he's a solid NFL right tackle starting. There are a couple more from Adam Peters that I want to play when we come back, including how much wargaming on sort of the mock drafts go on in a front office before the draft. And then Ben asked him a question about his propensity to take high, RAS, relative athletic score prospects. He seems to really love those extreme athletic guys. You'll hear him answer that when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, this was Adam Peters. We'll play a few more of these. Ben will join us at 12. I will talk some Wizards and NBA playoffs with Josh Robbins from The Athletic at 12:40, and I'll have my NBA playoff predictions on the show. I know you can't wait for those. But this was Adam Peters asked about, the process of sort of mocking out the draft on their own. Here's what he said.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Adam, what kind of, or how much can you share, I guess, of the type of wargaming that you guys do in the organization as you prepare for the draft?
Wargaming?
Yeah, we call it mock draft.
Okay. Yeah, so we monitor all the mock drafts. I think, start with that. Like, we monitor everything. The folks I talked about earlier, seen him and his team. And then our R&D department does a great job of really getting all that stuff into our system. And so we can kind of have an idea of where guys are getting mocked, where guys are seen around the league, to the media, to the draft experts in the media. And that gives you an idea kind of where people are thought of publicly, which a lot of times is different than what it looks like in your building. So it kind of gives you a different perspective, so you're not so biased that you have a guy too low or too high. You kind of understand where maybe the league or others think of them. So we use all that information, and it keeps getting better and better. The guys are doing a great job of putting that together. And then, in terms of our mock drafts, we'll run a lot of simulations. We'll run a lot of simulated trades. If this happens, then what do we do? If this team calls, what do we do? What does that look like? Do we want to do that? Do we want to go back that far? Who's going to be there and all that? So all that stuff really starts happening right now, David. It's just we finished the draft meetings, and now it's the scenarios and those types of things. So that's what we'll shift to. And but yeah, that happens a lot. It's a good question.
I think it would be really fascinating to be a part of, or at least observe, this process. It's a long process. I mean, being there on draft night would be the ultimate. To be caught up in that, atmosphere and be able to observe it firsthand. Doubt we'll ever get there. But the number of sort of scenarios that have to be simulated, I wonder how many of them there are. I mean, there are so many possibilities on the trade front. There are so many possibilities, especially, look, at 29, it's really hard, which is where they were last year. At 7, it's a little bit easier. But I wonder, how many scenarios they have. Here's the first 6, here's who's on the board, and here are the possible trade partners. There's a lot that goes into it. I would imagine when they're on the clock, and by the way, if you didn't know this, Adam Peters spoke to this yesterday. There are now 8 minutes between picks in the first round versus 10. I like that as a viewer. But it makes it a little bit more, especially if, if you get surprised by something, it gives you a little bit less time to do something about it. Now, he said, in answering that, he said, that's why a lot of the drafts, a lot of the trade stuff has to be discussed in advance, which isn't new, but it just puts more emphasis on it being discussed in advance, the 10 minutes down to 8 minutes between rounds. What's the time on night 2 and night 3? I think it's 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, 5 sounds
picks?
right. I believe 5 is the answer.
So this was a question asked, I'm pretty sure, by Ben. I was watching this. I'm pretty sure I heard Ben's voice ask this question. But we've all talked a lot about how, he's drafted a lot of guys that have had very high RAS scores, relative athletic scores, a measurement of the type of athlete a prospect is. And, a guy like Sonny Styles is one of the highest, athletic freaks at that position that's ever been measured. And so that's why a lot of people think Styles kind of fits Washington at 7 if he's there, not to mention, his character, his apparently very high intelligence, his production, and they do have a need there. But anyway, you'll hear Ben's question, I think, and Adam's answer to his preference of super athletes.
honestly, you want the best player that can help you the most right now, but how much do you weigh kind of what you have on the roster, not just this year, but next year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, kind of contractually? How much does that weigh into what you guys will do?
That's not the one. I wanted you to play 19.
Hey, Adam, you guys have drafted not just athletes, but you've drafted like higher end guys. I think basically every one of your picks so far has been, according to various public metrics, like the top of the list of athletes. When did you kind of come across for you that this is what I want to do when it comes to building roster with these types of players?
Yeah, I mean, you always try to pick the best athletes, I think, so, I think that's a big part of it for sure. I think everybody's trying to do that. You don't want to get a bunch of guys like me running around there. So, really that's part of it, but part of it's the fit, part of it's the fit in the building, the fit with the scheme, just how we talk about being Commanders, and a lot of those guys, obviously the better players hopefully are better athletes, and they have some more upside, I think, too.
Is it always better to draft the best athletes versus the best football players? Those are not one and the same. He definitely has a preference for it. We've seen it going back to the 2024 draft, where Washington's 2024 draft, in terms of the aggregate RAS scores, the guy that created that was this guy, Kent Lee Platt. It was the highest for any draft class since he created that measurement. And they also drafted it last year in several spots. And by the way, they signed it in free agency in several spots, including Odafe Owe, who had a ridiculous relative athletic score coming out. Connerly's was high. That's why the Sonny Styles thing at 7 makes a lot of sense to me if he is available. I'm not saying that would be my preference, but Sonny Styles had a 10.00 perfect relative athletic score, which is the highest ever measured for an off-ball linebacker. Not to mention team captain, really smart, high character, major need. My prediction, we haven't gotten to that. My prediction is if Sonny Styles is available at 7, that's going to be the pick. All right, there was one more that I wanted to play from Peters yesterday. Remember when we got from, was it last year?
Yep, was last year.
When Cliff put the note on his desk, the big tackle from Oregon?
That's right, Josh Connerly.
Yeah, and he wanted Josh Connerly. So he was asked about whether or not the 2 new coordinators have left any notes on his desk yet.
Hey, Adam, you got 2 new coordinators, Blau over on this side in your right ear, Jones over here in your left ear. Has any of those guys in pleading their case left any notes on your desk and trying to get the player that they want?
Not yet. But I will say, it's been awesome working with them. And, both of those guys have been really cool. And I've said this before, and Lance can attest to this too, but really great, really collaborative, really helpful in getting us all, a whole scouting staff, to understand what we're trying to do offensively and defensively. And if there's something that's not clear, really doing a good job of crystallizing that, and been really involved in all these draft meetings, and really, active participants. And so the process has been really good with those guys, and really excited about, moving forward, both in the draft process, but also as coaches. Really, really impressed by both of them. But there haven't been any campaigns yet, but there's still a lot of time.
Yeah, they've both been super cooperative with our staffs, and the collaboration between, our scouts and the coaching staff, and those 2 in particular has been great. They've been, they've put a lot of time into this draft process, and they've really helped us to understand their vision, and we've tried to explain to them what's available and what's out there. And the level of collaboration and cooperation has been outstanding with those 2 specifically.
Yeah.
That voice was Lance Newmark. He did not speak a whole lot yesterday, but you caught him there at the end. All right, Ben Standig next. All right, Ben's with us as he is every Friday. This Friday, a week from a moment in which we'll know what the team did in the first round of the NFL draft. Ben is a multi-time mock draft champion in major mock draft competitions. That's a real thing. We talk about it every year, but he's very good at this. And you are right now on mock number 1. I know on mock number what? Where are you right now? Mock 8?
8, yes.
Okay. So, how many more before your submitted mock draft to the various competitions that you're involved in?
Yeah, I'm going to do probably the mock draft I enjoy doing the most is where I look at sort of a choose your own adventure version where lay it out 6 different ways that it could go depending on the position it's picked or trades or whatever. But then after that, it may just be the last one, the final one. I don't know if I'll do another one in between. I mean, I'm doing them on my own, but publicly, I may not do anything until the last one in terms of the whole first round.
By the way, I think would it be more interesting to you to see the process right now or to be there on draft night?
You mean to be in the war room, you mean?
Be in the war room on draft night or be a part of all of the meetings and conversations of the last few weeks in the next few days?
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting. I mean, I think if I had to pick, I'd probably pick the war room on draft night just because you want to, be there should there be some real, tense moment or you got to make a decision on a trade. But yeah, certainly it would be great to see, all the mechanics that go into it, the conversations leading up to it. And does that have any fruit? Does that bear any fruit for them going forward? So it would all be great, but I probably would pick the draft night just to be there.
It would be the most exciting, but we would learn the most about the guys running this organization and, by the way, about their current roster, because so many conversations, I'm sure, in those meetings about their own current roster and their needs. What do you think we learned, if anything, yesterday from Adam Peters and Lance Newmark?
Yeah, I mean, obviously light on specifics, but I guess I would say, look, this isn't surprising, but Adam Peters said, look, it's most likely we'll pick at 7. And, look,
right.
Every year there's tons of trade rumors that never go anywhere. So that's a logical thing. Odds are likely. But he also said, I don't want to make it sound like we're not looking at things. And he added, we're always doing our due diligence essentially. But to me, it sounded like an acknowledgement that there's a little more than just being, doing your due diligence. It sounded like, there's an acknowledgement that, it'd be good to get extra picks. So I don't know if that's really a big revelation or anything. Like I said, he didn't say it flat out, but that was my interpretation of it. So, again, at least it's just an acknowledgement that he's on the same page that the rest of us are, that, some perfect world, they could get extra picks, but, how are they willing to go down beyond where the top tier of players is? I think my guess is probably going to be no. And that's where it'll be interesting.
He, I guess, disagreed to a certain degree with Brett Veach, the GM of the Kansas City Chiefs, who believes that there will be a lot of trades in the first round. What do you think?
I just think, looking at, say, the top 10, I think there's just two scenarios that just make too much sense to not get done. The Cardinals at 3. I mean, if the Jets at 2 take Arvell Reese and David Bailey is sitting there, then I can see the Cardinals taking Bailey. But the assumption now is that the Jets would go Bailey. Reese being a bit more of a project, and the Cardinals have had some issues with similar projects like that, and they've won offensive line, it sounds like. So them trading down would absolutely make sense. Who trades up for it? I don't know, but I think Todd McShay laid out why Saints trading from 8 to 3 could make some sense. So we've heard about Dallas. I think the Browns at 6, another team where they may want to go offensive line, and you can get that probably a few spots later. So that could be a case where Dallas trades up and goes for try to get like a Sonny Styles.
I'll just say this in terms of the mock drafts. Now, obviously, I have no idea what teams' boards are, but when you hear most people talk about this, they say they grade out like maybe 10 to 12 players with a first round grade, which is very low relative to the norm. Every time I have done a mock draft without knowing this team's board, I always, when I get to the Cowboys at 12, I feel like you can tell the drop off is right there, especially for a team that's probably not going to take offensive line, which I wouldn't think that they would. So I think it's another reason why I can see Dallas trading up, because they probably recognize, boy, we're not going to get a defensive player that we need here, the value. So based on that, that's just 2 trades in the top 10. And then after that, you've got multiple teams with multiple first round picks. You got teams like Miami that have 4 third-round picks. So, yeah, I would think there'll be a decent amount of trades. But, again, I maybe that's wishful thinking because, again, there's always rumors, and then oftentimes these things just fall flat. So hopeful that there's some trades for sure.
The best part about trades in the NFL draft versus the NBA draft is they announce them when they've happened so that you don't get to the end of the first round and find out that the player you picked is actually property of another team. That may be the dumbest thing that we watch with respect to drafts, is the way the NBA does it. And I still don't know why they do it that way. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, we all know what's going on in real time.
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense that they don't. I mean, I don't know if there's some legalese to it, or it could just be that they need to verify the deal, and therefore they're not going to say public until it's been verified on their on their end, and for some reason maybe that system is slower. I don't know, but yes, it's very odd that they do it that way. When the player takes a picture, I mean, this happens even with the NFL, I guess, but the player takes a picture with the hat of a team that drafted him and he's not going to play for it.
It's so dumb. It's really one of the dumbest things. And you say we all know. We only know if we're watching the draft or we're on social media. If you just happen to walk by a screen and you see the ticker going by, you're completely confused once you get to the end of the first round. Now, back to the NFL draft, though. Give me the trade that you've mocked involving Washington that you either like the most or for whatever reason you think has the best chance of happening.
Well, I think to maximize the situation, go down as far as they possibly can to get a greater haul while still remaining in the top tier is probably a deal with Miami. The Dolphins pick 11 now. Obviously, the Dolphins are in a bit of a rebuild mode, new regime and all that. But, they've got 4 third-round picks. And maybe the new regime says, hey, we want to get, we want to go for it here and get a real building block right off the bat, whoever that might be for them. So them trading, I think you could look at it like their last 2 third-round picks are towards the end of the third for, to throw into Washington, or maybe it's one of the higher third-round picks plus a 4th. Again, that's not a second-round pick. In order to do that, you're going to have to trade down lower. And that's where, you have to decide, are you willing to drop down in talent level? I'm going to guess they're not. So Miami, if you play out the math, basically any of the players that we've discussed, for them, almost very, very good odds, at least one of them would be on the board, whether that's Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, Mansour Delane, and so on. I'm not even counting like a Jordan Tyson if they're cool with the medicals and would put a guy in like there, because if he was didn't have the injury history, he would definitely be in that top tier as well. And the offensive lineman, again, I wouldn't necessarily think they would take one, but hey, if maybe they reach a certain point and say, hey, we can get a guard right now better than what we have. Why not do that? So I think that trade to me, again, going to Miami, dropping out with Miami to get like an extra third, maybe 2/3 or a third and a 4th. I think that feels like it could be the most realistic. Again, I don't know that that's remotely on the table, but that just feels like the best chance to stay at the blue chip level while simultaneously getting more picks.
Talking to Ben Standig at Ben Standig on X on Twitter. Ben writes and covers this team on Substack. It's totally worth it. It's hardly anything a month. It's called Last Man Standing. You can get a link to it if you go to his X account, again, at Ben Standig. So you did something that I always find interesting, which is kind of the consensus of many mock drafts. Like I think the one area on the Sunday afternoon following a draft and evaluating a draft is you can evaluate it based on, to a certain degree, it's not foolproof, but did they draft a player in a spot that was, from a consensus standpoint, too early or too late? Tell everybody about what you kind of went through in the process and in developing a consensus board and who you used to develop that consensus.
Yeah, I'm not in front of my laptop. I don't remember exactly everything. In case you want me to say anything on that, I have the screen up. But
it's okay.
Yeah, I think. Okay, like I think like there's some sites out there, and they'll say, "Oh, we have 100 and something mock drafts, and we put them all together." And I'm like, "Cool. I don't know who 95% of these people are.
Exactly.
Just because you put up a mock draft doesn't mean you actually know anything." So I basically just went with some of the more established ones that put, but also people who put out a list of at least 100 players. That would be like Todd McShay at The Ringer, the ESPN guys, Matt Miller and Jordan Reed, Dane Brugler with The Athletic.
Yep.
Yeah, and PFF, like, their sort of broad one. And then this other site, Draft Tech, that's been around forever, and I always just kind of use them. So I went there. So I just went with that group. So, it's not 100, but I know who these people are. Whether I agree with their opinions or not, I know they're based in some level of reality. Also, let's be realistic. The group think aspect of all this is off the charts. There's no way that normal people are scouting 200 players, period, let alone in a real way. So they just
right.
The conversation, if the conversation is, oh, Jordan Tyson now, you might go 8 or 9. Well, that's because that's what the people who are in touch with the NFL people think is going to happen, and then it trickles down from there. So those sites are, a lot of times, like I said, it's a group think anyway.
Yeah, I love this because even though, again, you put together a consensus board with legitimate people that people know, and there are others out there that put consensus boards together with, as you said, 100 mock drafts, and it's not foolproof. But if you want to evaluate or grade a draft when it's done, that's the only way to do it, because you have no idea in projecting these players most of the time. It's looking at, okay, they drafted, they traded back and they drafted Cooper Jr. from Indiana. Did they get him at a spot that was at the consensus, above the consensus, or below it? Did they get value or not? And it's one way to do it. Now, one of the reasons I brought this up is I do like this list that you put together, and it'll be interesting to use this list against the Washington picks, in terms of, where they pick these players, because you've got essentially, the top 100 players ranked based on these consensus mocks. But man, and it does not surprise me, but Jeremiah Love is the number 1 player per all of these mock drafts and big boards. He's the number 1 player in the draft. And I said earlier, Ben, that this is the one player more than any other in this draft that if we're sitting here a week from today and Jeremiah Love was on the board at 7 and Adam Peters didn't take him, that's the one that would really anger the fan base. Do you agree? More than any other. Maybe Sonny Styles, if they passed on him too. But Love is the real, everybody believes, generational player in this draft.
Yeah, obviously one of the big talking points this draft has been that arguably the 3 best players in the draft, Jeremiah Love, safety Caleb Downs, and linebacker Sonny Styles, all play non-premium positions, right. And that just has to do a lot with how the league values certain positions in terms of getting paid. Putting all that aside, the difference between Love and, say, Caleb Downs is that they're both excellent football players, but Love also brings that higher-end athleticism, which, as Adam Peters pointed out, generally means more upside, right? Caleb Downs, obviously a very good athlete relative to the norm and really good for a football player, but he doesn't have particularly exciting speed or measurables or things like that. So, like, Love is like the best combination of both. Like, even Sonny Styles, I was talking to a former front office person in the league this week, and he was saying that, like, for him, like, Styles maybe even has the bigger upside of all these guys we're talking about, but the floor is lower than maybe you would like. And also, it's good to remember, not that the public mock drafts, as you were just discussing, are always accurate, but before the combine, Sonny Styles was typically being projected like in the 10 to 15 range.
Yeah.
And then when he blew up at the combine, then he became a top 5 pick, whereas Love and Downs were consistently there all throughout.
It kind of happened with Delane too, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, he was more like, maybe like, I think he was still sort of like at the back end of like this top tier group we were talking about. But now the odds that, now there's more discussion. Could he be there at 7 for Washington? Would that be something they would do? Maybe we weren't doing that before he ran a really good 40 time. But his tape, I think is also, pretty impressive from everybody that I've heard talk about it. And if that's the pick, I don't think anybody would balk at that. So, it's all very interesting. Here's the thing that I think for me, at the end of the day, and this was essentially the question that I asked Adam Peters yesterday, some version of this, which was, your history here has been you take
I played
athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, not to say he gave like a particularly great answer, but the point of that question for me was, this is a draft where some of the guys who you may need the most, a wide receiver like Carnell Tate or the safety like Caleb Downs, and they would not fall into that category. They're really good athletes, but they're not into the category of where he's drafting. And, again, he just said, hey, look, typically the better athlete has the more upside. And it's not always about athleticism, but the trend has been that way in 2 years. And, would he break that for Caleb Downs or Carnell Tate? We'll see. And look, that's my opinion of, not my opinion, but that's when I'm looking at, say, the RASC or the NFL teams have way better metrics than that. So they may have other information that says, in-game Caleb Downs is everything you want as an athlete. His in-game speed is great, whatever. That may be. That's part that's hard to know. But from what we see, there's a difference between some of these guys when it comes to athleticism.
Yeah, and his preference for it has been obvious over his first 2 drafts, first 2 off seasons, and even this beginning free agency wise of his 3rd off season. So if I said to you just one of the 3 will be available at 7, Styles, Downs, Love, who's the most likely of those 3 to be available at 7?
Well, I'll put it like this. I think if Durante Jones is this year's Cliff Kingsbury, drops the note to Peters. Last year, Kingsbury apparently dropped the note, said take Josh Connerly, which ultimately they did. If he did that, boy, I think Caleb Downs would be such a good fit because the safety in that Brian Flores defense is so impactful, the way that probably even maybe more important than a cornerback. And I'm not just counting Styles, but like, they have, they added Leo Chenal, like, they have some pieces of linebacker. That said, the offense just is not have enough. And I know that Jeremiah Love is not a wide receiver, but he is an excellent pass catcher. And so even if they go into the season with the current group of receivers, if you add Jeremiah Love, I just think it gives you so much more dynamic ability on offense. And that's the one thing. If they went strictly on need, they are definitely taking, in my view, a running back, or they're either taking Love or a receiver, because the need is clearly there. So that's my guess. The Downs one to me is just so fascinating because I can imagine again that Durante Jones is going, this is the guy we need to take this defense up a notch, and Adam Peters looking at it going, but these other guys are also really, really good and better upside because of their athleticism.
All right, well, you answered my next question, but you didn't answer my first question, which was, of those 3, which is if I said just one made it to 7, which is the most likely to make it to 7 and be available?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I probably would say Downs. I mean, I know there's some talk about the Giants possibly picking him at 5, and maybe they do, but that's kind of the only team. Whereas like Love and Styles, I don't know if they make it past the Titans at 4, the Giants at 5. Does somebody trade up, at least for Styles at 6 with the Browns? So I think Downs is probably the most likely to be there.
All right, talking to Ben Standing, part of what you wrote about too in ranking and doing the consensus is you came up with what you had referred to earlier, which is this draft has 12 blue chip players, and that's very low. Now, typically the number doesn't go much higher than 20, but I think 12, didn't somebody tell you not that long ago that 12 was like the lowest it's been in several years in terms of the overall thought in terms of how many generational talents there are in this draft?
Yeah, that is definitely a lower number than you anticipate. I mean, I know it sounds confusing that, wait, there's 32 teams. How are there not 32 players? Well, 32 players will be drafted as first-round picks. They just are all not necessarily graded that way. And again, this is, whenever somebody says, oh, it's a weaker draft for whatever the reason, and then you go back 3 years later and that draft produces some good players, people say, oh, I told you, they never know what they're talking about. It's all about projections. Nobody on the face of the earth knows how Fernando Mendoza will do, or Jeremiah Love, or any of these people. We've all assumed certain players would hit. They didn't, and then vice versa the other way. But it's just based on what level of certainty do you feel now, and the level of certainty here with most of these guys is not good enough to be picked in the top 10, but that's how it's going to roll.
One other thing on what you wrote recently. This is really good, and I urge everybody to go read it. Ben's not only done this consensus list, but he's got a composite board with kind of the high-low range in terms of where they get picked. And then he's got a list of polarizing prospects from a tier 1 where there's extreme disagreement to a tier 2 where there's strong disagreement to a tier 3 where there are notable swings. And you include, the swings on 3 players that I think, are possibilities for Washington, whether it's at 7 or even in a very abbreviated trade back. Not Bailey necessarily, but you've got Bailey, Bain, and Delane on this list of notable swings. Just real quickly on all 3 players, why are there swings on all 3? I think we know on Bain, the short arms and maybe even some of the personal stuff, but why on Bailey and Delane?
Yeah, I don't, again, I don't know that they're really with Bailey. I mean, I know that's what it says because some people just decided that they rank him lower in a draft where, again, there's just very little certainty about picks. His ability to rush the passer, I think, really stands out. And obviously, that's a premium position. Now, I think, some people, I've heard like, hey, he's really good with his speed, but there's not a lot else. There's not necessarily like a plan B and things like that. So that maybe for some people, there's a little bit there to discount. I'd be surprised at this point if he gets outside the top 3, but that would be the reason why for him. And, for like Delane, I think it's just, do you like him more, or do you prefer Carnell Tate, or do you prefer Caleb Downs? Or, he seems to be generally in that, mid to late lottery section, so to speak. But yeah, again, that to me reads more like a personal preference thing than it does like, oh, there's some real concerns there.
If Akeem Mesidor, the edge pass rusher for Miami, who played on the opposite side of Ruben Bain and was an outstanding player this past season, if he were 21 years old instead of 25 years old, would he go easily before Bain?
I think so, because when one of the concerns with Bain, and largely because of the shorter arm reach than desired, is that based on that and his other attributes, people don't see a consistent 10 plus a year sacker, right?
Yeah.
That's not, if you're going to draft that position that high, that kind of needs to be the bar. Mesidor is the better bet as a pass rusher, but he is 25 years old. So, if his goal is to win next year and then nothing else matters, then he probably would go ahead of Bain. But since that's not how this works, that is beyond one season, then yeah, he's going to slip a bit somewhere mid to back end of the first round. But yes, I think the age thing, that's what, it's unusual, but we see more of these guys who are older because of the whole, COVID situation where players were allowed to have extra time in college and things like that. So, I think that's a case where, the age is definitely going to hurt his draft stock.
You sent me something the other day, just the possible overall drafts for Washington. Your last option was my favorite, the one where you had multiple trades.
Don't say it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'll tell you this: Bud Clark being involved in it was a real game changer for me, because I think he's going to be a really good safety in the league, the kid from TCU. But why didn't you want? Why am I not saying it out loud?
Well, because I want to put it on my. I have one. I don't even know if I'm going to use it yet, but two, I want to.
Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Want to put it on my site. We can talk about it next week.
I think it's really good. You should put it on the site. It was fun reading.
Yeah.
Right.
It's probably my favorite mock draft to do every year, because I constantly am like, well, it's a butterfly effect. If you do this, then this happens, and at least this way, it's like, okay, I'm going to show you all the butterfly effects that all to me seem realistic. The last one is a little, I guess, it's like, okay, we had a little too many pops at the draft war room, and we got a little nuts. But again, even there, I tried to.
I like the last one. Let me tell you. Well, I'm just going to mention this. Two of my favorite players in this draft are Cooper and Rodriguez, and I also like Bud Clark a lot. So that was also basically Ben did 6 Washington mock drafts, and he sent me a text and said, pick your favorite one. So I just told you that number 6 is my favorite. But you should definitely put that up on your Substack.
I will let this advisory committee know, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, the advisory committee. All right, last one, because I just noticed this on your X account. So you did a show with Galdi the other day, the live show. I was doing it on radio on the uniforms. So what was your thoughts? What was your big takeaway from uniform unveiling day on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get as excited about obviously I'm not a pure fan anymore, so I don't get as excited about it as like you and others. The thing that to me that just never made any sense is that we understand, at least, even if you don't agree, why they changed the name. It never made any sense why they changed the uniform. That at least make it look like the team that we're familiar with, even if they're called something else. So at least this gets you back not just to burgundy and gold, but to the specific era where they were, the kings of the castle. So I think that all look pretty good. I mean, I kind of like the spear in the alternate helmets. I think I do. So that I'm assuming this is like a trial balloon to see what people really think, because they'll use it, a couple times a year or a couple times next year, and then see that's the interesting one, because that does take it to another level when it comes to recognizing the past. And I think that would go over well with a lot of people. Maybe not far enough for some, but I thought that was a pretty interesting look.
Yeah, to your first, reaction. I read this quote, I think, on the show yesterday or maybe 2 days ago. But Patrick Arthur, who's the chief marketing officer and was very much involved in this whole process, had a quote in Kime's story. Quote, "We wanted to bring back all the traditional elements. So when people come to Northwest Stadium next year and they're watching the game, they see their team that they grew up rooting for on the field." Closed quote. Yeah, that's been part of the problem of the last 4 seasons, is it hasn't looked anything like the team. And it was just too much change. Not to mention they got it all wrong anyway. And it was a terrible choices were made and a terrible unveiling, in February of 2022. But to your point, okay, they wanted to come up with a new name, but they should have never changed the look, because it just further detached so many people emotionally from what they had been attached to. But anyway,
yeah,
right.
I mean, if you took the uniform from the last few years and then took the old school one that they're going to use, and you gave it to like the Devil Wears Prada group and said which one's better without any other context, maybe they pick the one from the last few years.
Right.
That doesn't matter. This is about nostalgia, so don't screw with that. The Green Bay Packers could probably do better, and if you change it, everybody would murder you. Don't do that.
Is Devil Wears Prada? Isn't the new one out, or is it just coming?
I think it's coming, but I don't know. I haven't been to the movies for a minute.
Oh my God, we got a sewing circle here talking about Devil Wears Prada 2.
I mean, it's a popular movie.
May 1st, folks.
You know what? I enjoyed the movie. I loved it. Meryl Streep, I don't know that she was better she was better in a lot of other things, but I'm a big Emily Blunt fan. Big Emily Blunt fan.
100%.
Yeah.
Could not agree more. Whether I go see it in the theater, we'll see about that.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Ben Standing, everybody. Definitely check him out over the next week with his Substack stuff. It's really entertaining pre-draft reading. When we come back, I'll do a quick NBA playoff preview, giving you my picks, and then Josh Robbins from The Athletic will jump on, and we'll talk about what we learned from Will Dawkins yesterday, and we'll get Josh's picks on the upcoming NBA playoffs. Also, let me just mention, tonight is a big night for the Wizards and their draft prospects. I'll explain before the end of the show. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. Don't forget, we are free and live on the Odyssey app, and you can watch the show on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. So tonight in the NBA play-in games, it is, I mean, I'm actually excited. I wish it were the Clippers, but to watch Steph do what he did the other night and then get a swing at Phoenix, I actually like Golden State's chances to win that game. That's the late game. And the winner of that game ends up being the 8 seed. And for that, you get to play Oklahoma City. in a best-of-7 first-round series. The first play-in game tonight features Charlotte, who won an absolute thriller at home the other night against Miami. They're on the road against Orlando. They're actually favored as the road team tonight. The winner of that game gets the Pistons in a best-of-7 series. So there are rooting interests tonight if you are a Wizards fan. The Wizards have a pick swap opportunity with the Phoenix Suns. So if Phoenix loses tonight, they end up in the draft lottery. Believe it or not, the last 2 lotteries, a play-in team has won the last 2 lotteries. Last year, it was Dallas. They were a play-in team. They went into the lottery. They got the first pick, Cooper Flagg. And I forget the year before that, but 2 play-in teams back-to-back have won the lotteries with long odds of winning the lottery. But wouldn't it be interesting if the Wizards ended up with the worst possible pick with their own, but Phoenix jumped up to the first or second spot, and then the Wizards could swap with them. So you want the Warriors to beat the Suns tonight. It also is a bit of an increase if the Hornets win tonight and Orlando ends up in the lottery. Why, you ask? Because Orlando would actually end up being a team that would have worse odds than Phoenix of getting a top pick if Orlando gets thrown into the lottery instead of Charlotte. Okay, that's it on that. On the NBA playoffs, let me go through my picks real quickly, and then Josh Robbins from The Athletic will jump on. So I won't fast forward to the end here. I'm going to go through it real quickly on each side of the bracket, the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. In the West, I would love to see Golden State and the Thunder play, but neither Golden State nor Phoenix has a chance against the Thunder. It's a 4-0, 4-1 series against Phoenix. Maybe Golden State could take 2, and we could have 2 thrilling games with Steph going off and, in a last gasp period. 38, I'm not saying he's going to be done, but maybe a last gasp for the Warriors. Remember, Jimmy Butler is done. He's been done for the year. The Lakers and the Rockets in a 4-5 series. The Lakers are all banged up and injured. LeBron can't carry them past Kevin Durant and company. I like the Rockets there. The best series of the first round. If you're interested in participating with me in watching the NBA playoffs, which are great, Nuggets T-Wolves, a 3-6 matchup out west. This is a big postseason for Nikola Jokic. When they won the title a few years ago, we thought it was the first of many to come. It hasn't been. And Oklahoma City looks more dynastic than Denver. Nikola Jokic is going to go down as a top 10 greatest player of all time and one of the top 4 or 5 centers of all time. But he needs another championship run. He's been to 1 finals. They won it, but that can't be the only one. In terms of his legacy. Spurs, Trailblazers, if you want to watch Denny Avdia, he's become a star. They can't win that series, but they can win a few games. The series that you want to see is Denver-San Antonio in the second round of the Western Conference Finals, which would be amazing. I would give Denver a shot in that series. San Antonio just doesn't have a lot of playoff experience. The Thunder and Rockets would be a hell of a second-round series, but I would pick the Thunder there. I like the Thunder over Denver in the West, and Oklahoma City with a chance to defend its title as the Western Conference champions. In the East, the best first-round series is probably Cavs-Raptors. It'll be interesting to see Celtics 76ers, but let me just say this. I like the Celtics by a lot to come out of the East. I think they beat the Knicks in a second-round series, and then I think they end up playing Oklahoma City in what could be a second straight, incredibly compelling finals. And that's what I got. I got Oklahoma City in a second straight year winning a Game 7 at home. This time, not Indiana, but Boston to win the NBA title, their second straight. Josh Robbins will join us next. Josh Robbins covers the Washington Wizards for The Athletic. The NBA playoffs continue tonight with the last part of the play-in round, as I talked about last segment, and then it gets underway with 4 games Saturday and 4 games Sunday, one of my favorite weekends of the year. Love game ones on 2 consecutive days with 4 games each day, and then the schedule kind of breaks down, and sometimes you get in that first round a long stretch of days between games in certain series. We'll see how the whole thing schedules out. But Josh is with us. And before I get your thoughts on the NBA playoffs coming up, yesterday Will Dawkins addressed the media and said that he anticipates that Brian Keefe will be back. Were you surprised by that?
No, I wasn't. I think that, I know that Wizards officials think he did an excellent job with what he was asked to do. And he did it all with a level of grace and a lack of complaining that was admirable. So not surprised at all. He also collaborates well with the front office, as was necessary in a season like this, where it was so important for them to make sure they didn't convey that top 8 protected pick to the New York Knicks. And it actually turned out very well in that sense, because they're going to draft in the top 5 coming up.
You and I, the last time we talked about the difference between a developmental coach and a coach that's being asked to win games, and the in-game strategy part of it, the planning and coaching over a period of days in which you've got back-to-backs, but the games are competitive games trying to win games. And what I said the other day is, I have no idea what kind of coach Brian Keefe will make once they are trying to compete and trying to win as many games as possible beginning next year. I do know this, that everybody swears he's very good as a developmental coach with these young players that he's had. And you told me the same. What do you know about Brian Keefe that leads you to believe that he's going to be a really good coach, or good enough to lead a team that's actually trying to win games?
Well, you and I have had these discussions on air many times, that it was impossible to properly evaluate Brian Keefe as an X's and O's coach, given what he was asked to do and what he did. I would imagine, and heck, I don't even need to imagine, I'm parsing my words a little too carefully. I know that he had to hold himself back here these last 2 years in terms of the way he coached, because he had to play certain rotations in order to make sure that the Wizards never conveyed that pick. It wasn't just this year where they owed a protected pick. They owed a protected pick last year, top 10 protected, I believe. So what fans saw from Brian Keefe, these rotations and these playing choices that he made, I don't think he ever would have made those decisions under what we would consider regular circumstances. Yeah, this was NBA basketball in name only for the vast majority of the last 2 seasons. So what have I seen that tells me that he will be a good X's and O's coach? Even I haven't seen a whole lot of that, except that when I speak to scouts and other executives throughout the league, they all tell me that they love the stuff that he draws up for ATOs and after timeout situations. They love how he will get on his players after they make a mistake. Those things he has shown in abundance. And yet I can't say for sure that he's going to be the right X's and O's coach. What I would have a concern of is that it's enormously difficult to go from a culture in which a team has tanked a season, which he has had to guide, by the way, to going full throttle to win games. It's an extraordinarily difficult 180-degree turn. And I would imagine it's even more difficult when it's the same coach trying to bridge that gap. And so I don't have a definitive answer for you, which made it a question of whether he would return in the first place.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. You can help me with this. Was it Monty Williams who was the coach before Bickerstaff in Detroit?
Yes, he was, but Monty Williams lasted only 1 year. That,
Okay.
for whatever reason, was a very bad fit. Dwayne Casey preceded Monty Williams. I think an example that you might be looking for is Stephen Silas, the transition from Stephen Silas in Houston after several rebuilding seasons to Ime Udoka in Houston.
Yeah.
And yet even that is not a clean comparison because Ime Udoka, as good of as a coach as he is, and he's an excellent coach, he benefited from the arrivals of Fred Van Vliet and Steven Adams and Dylan Brooks, and then this past season, Kevin Durant. So that's not a clean comparison either.
Well, look, Josh Harris stuck with Brett Brown after the tanked seasons for a few years.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. And then the Sixers seemingly underachieved in the playoffs with Brett.
Right.
That's another example. And then Jamal Mosley led Orlando to a 49-win season 2 years ago. Last year they fell, and I think it was 41-41. This year 45-37, and they're going to be in a winner-take-all East play-in game tonight. Yeah. And so that's another example.
All right. Tell me what you think we learned from Anthony Davis yesterday, or better question is, what did he mean by we got to figure things out? You know, what does he want from the team in terms of information moving forward to feel comfortable?
If we take him at his word that that's the issue, that he wants to be in a position where the team is going to really try to contend for a title right away, or be in a position to contend for a title in 27-28, which would be after a whole full season from now, it seems to me that he wants some sort of assurance, and he's brought this up before, that the Wizards would be willing to go into the luxury tax to add personnel. Or certainly I think he seems to be implying that he wants a few more, at least one more veteran on the roster. One would think that he would want two more veterans who can play right away and are playoff tested. Now, what he might really mean potentially could be a contract extension.
Of course. Yeah.
And so that might be what is his end game here, where, all right, well, he might still have concerns about the roster, but those concerns are something that he could get over if he gets an extra 2 years tacked onto his contract, which has a player option for the year after next.
Do you have anybody in mind that you like? I thought of obviously contract. I thought of coach too, having a say in coach. But then the other part of it was consistent with today's superstar players. Hey, I want to bring some people here with me. And you just mentioned a veteran or two. Are there any names that come to your mind when you think about who he might want to bring here?
No, not immediately. And
okay.
Keep in mind, this is a rather unspectacular free agent class. And because he's due a lot of money, and Trae Young is going to be due a lot of money, I believe the Wizards only will have the non-taxpayer mid-level at their disposal. Now, the Wizards also have a whole group of young players who have some value.
Yeah.
Like, for example, and I'm just mentioning the name, haven't heard him in rumors or anything, like Bilal Coulibaly, for example. 3 years in, maybe there's a rebuilding team out there who has a veteran who could help the Wizards, who might want to take a chance on Bilal and have him be part of kind of a build. So it doesn't have to come in free agency. If they were to make additional roster augmentations, it could come in a trade. And by the way, I still do expect the Wizards to add a little bit more physicality down low this year. I think that's a certainty in my mind, that is they're going to want someone else who they can bring off the bench who could battle against bigs and get a defensive rebound. Not unlike Valanciunas. Now, they're not going to go after Valanciunas, who's at the end of his career, but someone along those lines who can bang with 7-footers and hold his own physically.
All right, I got a minute here, but I wanted to ask you about the playoffs that get started tomorrow. I mentioned something, and I don't know if this is something that's out there, but for me, as an NBA fan, I think this is a big postseason for Nikola Jokic. You know, they won the title in 23. We expected more, but now Oklahoma City looks more dynastic, and even San Antonio does, than Denver. You know, he's going to go down as one of the greatest that's ever played, but his legacy is limited if it's just one finals appearance and one title. Do you agree with me that there's a little bit of pressure for him to get something done here as he enters his early 30s?
Wow, what a great question. So great that I'm trying to process my answer. You know, I wouldn't frame it in those terms. I would frame it in he's still not old, and he doesn't play a game that's predicated on athleticism or explosiveness. His game is predicated on pure smarts. So I don't really think that his clock is running out, but I think that Oklahoma City and San Antonio arguably are only going to get better.
Exactly.
And so you know, you only have a few real chances at this whole thing, and his chances are going to be limited by Wemby and what OKC has built. Just like in the early stages of their careers, Wemby and SGA, their chances are going to be limited by Jokic.
But we'll see, because we're going to see the Nuggets and the Spurs in round 2. And I think that that's one where if he led them to a win over a team with no playoff experience would be big for him. Look, I'm up against a hard break, but just give me your finals matchup and your winner real quickly.
I think it's going to be the Thunder against Cleveland, which is, I know I'm going out on a limb there, and I think the Thunder win.
Josh, thanks, as always. Hope you're well.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
At Joshua B. Robbins on X on Twitter. Window Nation's got a great deal going on right now. The more you buy, the more you save. That means you can save up to 50% depending on how many windows you purchase. Half price plus 0% interest for 5 years. If you've been thinking about windows, all I ask is give them a chance to come out and give you a free in-home estimate. You can schedule that by calling them at 866-90-NATION or heading to windownation.com. 866-90-NATION, windownation.com. Mention my name. They'll come out and give you a free in-home estimate and then let you make the choice. Back on Monday after this weekend, Chris Russell's next.